Hallelujah. All praise to the Most High. Peace to you in the name of His Son. This is your brother, Israel of the household of faith. And I count it truly a blessing every single time that I can come before the priest word of God. All right, brothers and sisters, I want to get right into today's lesson. And I want to deal with how we are to worship the Most High. Um, when you look at religion today and people who claim to believe in the Bible, even amongst believers, it's this idea that you can worship him any way you want to, as long as your heart is in the right place. Well, that's not the case. You cannot worship a perfect being, an all-knowing, omnipotent being, one who created us through his son. Peace to you, brother. Good to see you. You can't worship him just how you want to worship him. He has that stipulated how we are to worship him. And the way in which he told us to worship him, he actually manifested that through his chosen people, Israel. But we want to go to John, the 4th chapter, because here the Messiah, he's talking to this Samaritan woman, and he says something here. This is John, the 4th chapter, and verse 24. John, the 4th, peace to everybody. John, the 4th chapter, and verse 24. It says, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Now, it doesn't say you can worship him according to your traditions and your doctrines. Okay? Matter of fact, we want to hold our finger here. We're going to come back here. I want to go to John, Matthew, the 15th chapter. Matthew, the 15th chapter. Matthew, the 15th chapter, in verse 1. I want to pick it up here because here we see an example of false worship. Okay, so in verse 1 it says, then came to Jesus scribes and Pharisees which were of Jerusalem, saying, why do thy disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. Okay, so now these scribes and Pharisees were worried more about their traditions than what was written. And so they're trying to call them the carpet, so to speak, about them not washing hands before they eat bread. It didn't say, why are you violating or transgressing Torah? It didn't say that. It says, why do you transgress the tradition of the elders? This is tradition. In other words, tradition is made up by man. The law of God, or the law of the Most High, that is not tradition. That is through an eternal being. Hold your finger here just to see something about his law. Psalms, the 19th chapter. Because in the 19th chapter, it's being expressed. David expresses that the existence of God, or the Most High, is shown through his creation. And then he says something about the law. In verse 7, it says, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. See, the statutes of the Lord are righteous, rejoice in the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, endureth forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. See, that's from the Creator. And again, he created the worlds through his Son. The Father did. But they're not talking about that. They're not talking about what in Deuteronomy, the 4th chapter, where it says, now therefore hearken, O Israel, unto this, in verse 1, unto the statutes and unto the judgments which I teach you for to do them, that ye may live and go in and possess the land which the Lord God of your fathers giveth you. Ye shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall ye diminish aught from it, that ye may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. They're not talking about the commandments of God. They're not talking about the statutes, the judgments, the ordinances, the law, mitzvah, Torah. They're talking about the traditions of man. So, because you can't find, you must wash your hands before you eat bread. Thus saith the Lord. It's not written. So it says in verse 3, so now the Messiah, he calls them on their hypocrisy. He says, But he answered and said unto them, why do you transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? And he gives them an example. He says, but he answered and said unto them, why do you transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? For God commanded, in verse 4, for God commanded, saying, honor thy father and mother, and he that curseth father or mother, let him die the death. But ye say. So now he told them what the commandment was, and that's in the 10 Commandments. Read that in Exodus, the 20th chapter. Honor thy father and thy mother. That's the commandment. The first commandment was promise, right? That your days may be long in the land. So he says, but ye say, whosoever shall say to his father or his mother, it is a gift. See, now we read it's without condition in verse 4. It doesn't say honor thy father and thy mother. Honor thy father and thy mother if you want to. It says honor thy father and thy mother. And then he said, he that curses father and mother, let him die to death. But ye say, whosoever shall say to his father or his mother, it is a gift. Meaning a gift is freely given. So he says, by whatsoever thou mightest be profited by me. He says, and honor not his father or his mother, he shall be free. Free from that requirement to honor your father and your mother. And then he says, thus have you made the commandment of God of none effect by your tradition. You understand? He says, like I said, he called it hypocrisy. Here he says in verse 7, ye hypocrites. Well, did Isaiah prophesy of you, saying, these people draw nigh to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain they do worship me. So now he's saying they talking about me. You see it in Christian churches. You even see it among some so-called believers. He said, these people draw nigh unto me with their mouth. Because understand, when he wrote this, it wasn't like it was a bunch of Catholics running around, or Protestants, Apostolics, or Lutherans. Nah, he was talking to his own people who claim to believe in the Most High. So he said, these people draw nigh unto me with their mouth. He took them back to Isaiah, right? What's that? Around the 29th chapter, somewhere around there. He said, this people draw nigh to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart or their mind is far from me. So they're talking about me, but they're not honoring me. Why? Because they're coming up with their own thing. That's why I say he's a spirit. And they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. You can't worship him according to what you want, according to a lie, right? I'm going to come up with my own requirements, my own customs, and say, thus saith the Lord. And I'm gonna add that. That's when we kept reading in Deuteronomy. He said, don't add, don't take away. But that's what people are doing. They have added. He said, but in vain they do worship me. See, vain means for naught or for nothing. So you can worship him for nothing, meaning all your endeavor, all your works will be for naught. It won't do you any good. He said, but in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. You understand? Not the commandments of God. Ones that teach the commandments of God, to tell you in Matthew the 5th chapter, they'll be great in the kingdom of heaven. But he said, but in vain they do worship me, teach, which is going to be on the earth. He said, but in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. You understand? So that's vain what they're doing. It's for nothing. Now, John the 4th chapter and verse 24, he says, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So the question is, what is the truth, brothers and sisters? Let's go to Psalms 119th division. So what is the truth? If you have to worship him according to this, what is it? Psalms 119, we're going to pick it up at verse 142. Psalms 119 and 142. And it reads, thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness. Okay, he says, thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness. He says, and thy law is the truth. So if you're gonna worship the Most High, it can't be according to a lie. It can't be according to the traditions and the doctrines of men. It must be according to the truth. And his law is the truth. His Torah is the truth. Psalms 119 and verse 151. David writes here, thou art near, O Lord, and all thy commandments are the truth. His word, brothers and sisters. Let's go to John the 17th chapter. John the 17th chapter. He gave us his word. He gave us all this through his son, actually. John the 17th chapter, and we want to pick it up at verse 14. Here, and we have a connection back to the Father through his son. But John the 17th chapter and verse 14, prior to his crucifixion, he makes this intercessory prayer, and he says, I have given them thy word. Now he's talking about those of his. He says, I've given, because he's at the door knocking. Who's going to hear? Who's going to hearken to the call? He says, or adhere to the call. He says, I have given them thy word, and the world hath hated them. Why is the world hating you? For one, because the word of God, understand, the word of God makes you on one accord with the Lord, with the Most High, and that puts you at odds with the world. The love of God is enmity, or is enmity with the world, because they're antithetical to one another. You see the world right now, and what the world accepts, even what the world calls righteous. Righteousness in the world is not based on his Torah, which is righteous, but rather it is based on moral relativism. It is based on what people think to be moral at the time. I was listening to a candidate for president, and I said, well, let me hear what this individual has to say. And this individual I listened to several radio interviews, one NPR interview, and this individual was before the Poor People's Campaign as well. They were questioning this individual, being questioned by two so-called religious leaders who don't have a clue, right? And you could tell in some instances this individual understood, but in other instances you can tell that this individual did not understand what righteousness is. And this individual's whole thing is basically dealing with human suffering and dealing with what is right. But if you don't understand Torah, brothers and sisters, you don't understand what is right or righteous. You don't know what you should do. And so this individual is 100% in favor of abortion. But then you're talking about human suffering, as if the baby doesn't suffer in the womb when you crush the skull and pull it out of its only protection. You see, so you don't know what righteousness is. It's all what's acceptable at the time. So it says, I have given them thy word, and the world hath hated them. So when you have the word, brothers and sisters, you are sanctified, you are set apart. It says, because they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. I pray not that thou shouldest take them out of the world, but that thou shouldest keep them from the evil. He says, they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. He said, not of the world, not as if they would totally isolate themselves totally from the world, but they still sanctify in the things that in the way they conduct themselves. And he says, in verse 17, sanctify or set them apart through thy truth. Thy word is truth. His word is truth. His commandment is truth. His law is the truth. It's the truth. And if they that worship him God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Peace to you, Brother Leo. Good to see you there, brother. So he's saying you have to worship him according to the truth. Now let's go back to John, the 4th chapter, and pick up something else there. John, the 4th chapter. Because the worship of him and how to worship him, rather, was given unto one people. It wasn't given to the Romans. It wasn't given to the Chinese. It wasn't given to the Kenyans. It was not given to the Japanese. It was not given to these people who claim to have it today. These Gentiles, these Europeans. It was the word of God was not given to them. Not saying that they can't hear the word and be saved. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is they are grafted in. Okay? So now, and the Samaritan woman, now if you understand, the Samaritans were put there by the Assyrians around 721, 722. They were put in the land, and the Israelites could not stand. They hated the Samaritans. But these people had been in the land for a long time. Okay, so now it says, so now he runs into this Samaritan woman, has an encounter, and she says, "Our fathers," but she's a Samaritan. Our father, verse 20, our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is a place where men ought to worship. Jesus said unto her, "Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father." He says something. Ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship. Meaning we know what we're doing when we're serving our God. He says, for salvation is of the Jews. See, if you want salvation, if you want to be saved from eternal damnation, you have to do what was given to the Judea, what was given to Israel. Okay? We understand that you have to have faith in his son, right? And what his son did in shedding his blood for the remission of sins. We understand that. But ultimately, brothers and sisters, what you do, how you behave, how you operate should all be determined by Torah. Because that is what you need to do. Let's go to he says, you worship, you know not what we know, what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. Let's go to Romans, the 3rd chapter. Because here, like I said, other people, being of another nation will not stop you from being saved, gaining salvation. There's a commonwealth in Israel. You have, since Israel's inception as a nation, you have had other people who have latched on to Israel. You had other nations that were in the wilderness. You see in Isaiah where he talks about what can happen for the other nations. The Messiah himself, he said, listen, he ran to the centurion. He said, I have seen not so great faith, no, not in Israel. And I tell you, there's going to be those in the north, south, east, and west is going to sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom, and the children of the kingdom shall be be out. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So don't misunderstand when I say that other nations, it wasn't given to other nations. They have to take hold of what was given to Israel. Peace to you, brother Isaiah. So it says, peace to everybody that's listening. Brother James, Sister Rihanna, Sister Melissa, and Dizzy 911. Peace to everybody. So it says Romans 3 and verse 1. Because it was all given to Israel how to worship him. So it says in verse 3 and 1, what advantage then hath the Jew, or what profit is there of circumcision? He says in verse 2, much every way chiefly. This is 3 and 2, Romans 3 and 2. Much every way chiefly, because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. Okay? Now, that's who it was given to. It was given to Israel. Let's go to Psalms, the 140. Psalms, the 149th division. 47, excuse me, 147th division. So it says in verse 19, the psalmist writes, he showeth his word. Well, verse 147 says, praise ye the Lord. For it is good to sing praises unto our God, for it is pleasant and praise is comely. Then he said, or fitting, that's what comely means. Then he says in verse 19, he showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. See, that's who he gave it to. So how to worship him was given to Israel. Then he says, he hath not dealt so with any nation, meaning he didn't do the same thing that he did in showing him his word directly. He manifested himself directly unto the people. Okay? Hold your finger there. Let's go to hold your finger there. Let's go to Deuteronomy. Let's go to Deuteronomy, the 4th chapter. And I'm gonna pick it up at verse. I'm gonna just pick it up at verse 1 again. It says, "Now therefore hearken, O Israel, unto the statutes and unto the judgments which I teach you, for to do them, that ye may live and go in and possess the land which the Lord God of your fathers giveth you. Ye shall not add unto the word not which I command you, neither shall ye diminish from it, that ye may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you." Hold on one second. It says, I'm gonna pick it up at verse 5. It said, "Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that ye should do so on the land whither ye go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations." Because the other nations didn't get this. It says, "Which shall hear all these statutes." So now they're gonna hear these statutes, the other nations, and say, "Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great who have God so nigh unto them, as the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for? And what nation is there so great that has statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law, which I said before thee this day?" See, there's not another nation that experienced this. Let's go to Exodus, the 19th chapter. No other nation experienced anything like this. Just to show you what happened, I'm gonna pick it up at verse 4, in Exodus 19 and verse 14. It says, "And Moses went down from the mount unto the people and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said unto the people, Be ready against the third day, come not at your wives, or near your wives." He said, "And it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud." Why is a trumpet blowing? Because the Most High is coming. It says, "And Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God." See, there's no other people. That's why the fall was so great of Israel, quite frankly. No other people can make this claim. The people that are making the claim now are blaspheming. That's why I said, I know the blasphemy of them would say they are Jews and are not, but out of the synagogue can say they are not the chosen people. According to the Bible, according to history. So it said, "And Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the nether part of the mount. And Mount Sinai was," well, I'm going to pick it up verse 16 again. And it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. Why? Because this wasn't like some trumpet. A brother didn't have a ram's horn. Nah, this was the sound of an angel blowing a trumpet. That's why they trembling. Why? Because it's the coming of the Lord. That's like when he comes back, you're going to hear the trumpets. But so it said, and Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God. When the Messiah come back, the second coming, you're going to hear the trumpet. And Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the nether part of the mount. And Mount Sinai, and when you understand, this was actually the Messiah before he was manifested in the flesh as well. So when he came in this form, the trumpet blew, and it says, and Mount Sinai was all together on a smoke, meaning the mount was on fire, brothers and sisters, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice. And the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain. And the Lord called Moses and the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses up to the top of the mount, and Moses went up. See, this is unparalleled in the annals of human history. This never happened to any other people. The direct manifestation, not just through the creation, but him himself coming to a specific people, dwelling amongst a specific people. And so what he gave those people, this is what they were supposed to deal with, brothers and sisters. Let's go to Nehemiah. We go to Nehemiah, the 9th chapter. Nehemiah, the 9th chapter, and I'm going to pick it up at verse, because this is after the people come back into the land after the captivity, Babylonian captivity, after being in captivity, and the Medes and Persians come to power. And during the days of Ezra and Nehemiah, the people are allowed to go back and to rebuild. And he says something here. And this is Nehemiah, the 9th chapter, at verse 13. It says, thou camest down also upon Mount Sinai. It's talking about God, the Most High. It says, thou camest down also upon Mount Sinai, and spakest with them from heaven, and gavest them right judgments and true laws, good statutes and commandments. And we know that that's what the truth. That's what the truth is. He says, verse 14, and made us known unto them thy holy Sabbath, the commandments, them precepts, statutes, and laws by the hand of Moses, thy servant. He called Moses up, and he dispensed the law unto them. Right? Let's go to Amos. See, that's what he did, and you're counting that in Nehemiah. So that's what we have to worship him according to. We can't worship him according to what man has said, and then say that is appropriate to do. You can't worship God. You can't worship the Most High in that way. Just to show you an example of how you have to be. Let's go to 1 Chronicles, the 13th chapter. You can't just worship him any way you want to. 1 Chronicles, the 13th chapter. And let's see an example of people trying to worship him, but not worshiping him according to what he said. This is 1 Chronicles, the 13th chapter. I'm going to pick it up at verse. I'm going to pick it up at verse 1. I'm going to pick it up verse 2. 1 Chronicles 13:2. And David said unto all the congregation of Israel, if it seem good unto you, and that it be of the Lord our God, let us send abroad unto our brethren everywhere that are left in all the land of Israel, and with them also to the priests and Levites, which are in their cities and suburbs, that they may gather themselves unto us. and let us bring again the ark of our God to us. So now they want to bring the ark. It says, for we inquired not at it in the days of Saul. And it says, and all the congregation said that they would do so, for the thing was right in the eyes of all the people. So David gathered all Israel together from Shihor of Egypt, even unto the entering of Hemath, to bring the ark of God from Kirjath Jearim. And David went up and all Israel to Baalah, that is, to Kirjath Jearim, which belonged to Judah, to bring up thence the ark of God, the Lord, that dwelleth between the cherubims, whose name is called on it. And they carried the ark of God in a new cart out of the house of Abinadab, and Uzzah and Ahio drave the cart. So now they have the ark of the covenant on a new cart. All right, they had a new cart for everything. Seems they trying to inquire the Lord. So let's get a new cart. Now understand, this is many years after Moshe, after Moses, right? So it's after Aaron. So now they didn't put the ark of the covenant on a new cart. And David and all Israel played before God with all their might, and with their singing, and with harps, and with psalteries, and with timbrels, and with cymbals, and with trumpets. So they playing to they party, and they happy, hallelujah, right? But verse 9, and when they came unto the threshing floor of Kidon, Uzzah put forth his hand to hold the ark, for the oxen stumbled. So now the oxen stumbled, is being driven on a new cart, which is not supposed to be in the first place. So the oxen stumbles, and the ark is shaking. So Uzzah goes to stabilize the ark, puts his hand on the ark, and it says he put his hand to the ark in verse 9, because he put his hand to the ark, and there he died before the Lord. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against us, and he smote him because he put his hand to the ark, verse 10. And there he died before God. And David was displeased because the Lord had made a breach upon Uzzah, wherefore the place is called Perez Uzzah to this day. And David was afraid of God that day, saying, how shall I bring the ark of God home to me? So now it stayed in Obed-Edom, the Gittite, right, in his house. And then he was blessed for it, but they ain't moving, and they were afraid. Now, First Chronicles, we'll write in First Chronicles, the 15th chapter. All right, I'm gonna pick it up at verse 11. See, now they was trying to worship God, the Most High, but then it didn't work out. He killed Uzzah. You think about that. They praise. They're trying to praise the Most High, and then he stabilized the ark, and he killed him right there. I bet all that stopped. All that praise, all that laughter and joy and dancing, and that ceased immediately. The man got struck down in the midst of this celebration. But there's a reason, because they didn't do it according to what was written. First Chronicles, the 15th chapter and verse 11, it says, and David called for Zadok and Abiathar the priest, and for the Levites of Uriel, Uzziah, and Joel, Shemaiah, and Eliel, and Aminadab, and said unto them, ye are the chief of the fathers of the Levites. Sanctify yourselves, both ye and your brother. All right. So he said, be set apart, that ye may bring up the ark of the Lord God of Israel unto the place that I have prepared for. So now he's preparing to bring this up, and he's got to get the Levites. He said, and he tells you why, what the problem was in the first place. He said, when Uzzah was struck down, he says, for because ye did it not at the first, the Lord our God made a breach upon us. That's Perez Uzzah. He said, for that we sought him not after the due order, in the proper way. He's a spirit. You can't worship. You got to worship him in the spirit and the truth. You can't worship him just how you want to. Even though and that might seem like a little thing, but that's not You can't just make up stuff. That's like something like Christmas. Oh man, we doing Christmas. We gonna worship him. We gonna hark the herald, hear the herald sing, angel sing. Well, however that song go. Silent night, holy night. No, that's foolishness. He didn't tell you to do that. But then you don't keep his Sabbaths. Let me get this straight. You go worship him. He gave you the Sabbath day. He gave you his annual Sabbath, not Christmas and Easter, but Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, trumpets, tabernacles, atonement. You're not going to deal with that. But you're going to deal with some Christmas and Easter and worship him? It's not going to work. So it said, for because ye did it not at the first, the Lord our God made a breach upon us, for that we sought him not after the due order. Verse 14, so the priests and the Levites sanctified themselves to bring up the ark of the Lord our God. And the children of the Levites bear the ark of God upon their shoulders with the staves thereon staves thereon as Moses commanded according to the word of the Lord. Okay. So that's how you had to do it. Let's go to, hold our finger here. Let's go to Exodus, the 25th chapter. See, he said we did it, but not after the proper order. So yeah, we was doing it right, trying to bring it up, but we got to bring it up how he said to bring it up. This is Exodus, the 25th chapter. In verse 10, it says, and they shall make an ark of shittim wood, 2 cubits and a half the length thereof. See, even when they made the ark, it had certain dimensions. It says 2 cubits and a half. You can't say, well, we're going to make it 5 cubits and a half. No, he didn't tell you to do that. You got to do how he said. And a cubit and a half, the breadth thereof, and a cubit and a half, the height thereof. So you're going to say, you're going to make it, 5 cubits, shall be the length instead of 2.5 or 2.5 cubits. Nah. He said, now shall overlay with pure gold. Well, gold's too expensive. We're going to use copper. And say that. Within and without shalt thou overlay it, and shalt make upon it a crown of gold around about. And then it says something. Verse 12. And thou shalt cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in the 4 corners thereof. So it had gold rings in it. And 2 rings shall be on the one side of it, and 2 rings shall be 2 rings on the other side. Why? It says, and thou shalt make staves of shittim wood and overlay them with gold. So now you got some wooden staves, and you got to overlay them with gold. And thou shalt put the staves into the rings by the sides of the ark, that the ark may be borne with them. Okay? The staves shall be in the rings of the ark, they shall not be taken from it. Okay? So that's what the staves were for. The staves were for the carrying of the ark. Just so we know, I believe Numbers, the 4th chapter. Just Numbers 4 and 5. And when the camp setteth forward, Aaron shall come and his sons, and they shall take down the covering veil and cover the ark of testimony with it. See, when it came to that kind of thing, it was the Levites. You had Kohath, Merari, and Gershon. These 3, they had different things that they had to do. Okay. So, and when they did it the right way, everything worked out. Verse 20, so 1 Corinthians 15 and 25. So David and the elders of Israel and the captains over thousands went to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the house of Obed-Edom with joy. And it came to pass, when God helped the Levites that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, that they offered 7 bullocks and 7 rams. And David was clothed with a robe of fine linen, and all the Levites that bear the ark, and the singers, and Kenaniah, the master of the song with the singers, David also had upon him an ephod of linen. Thus all Israel brought up the ark of the covenant of the Lord with shouting and with sound of the cornet and with trumpets and with cymbals, making a noise with psalteries and harps. It came to pass as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came to the city of David, that Michal, well, that goes into Michal. She saw David dance and she despised him. That's something different. That gets beyond what my point here. My point is, because Michal was tripping, but my point is that when they did things the right way, peace to you, Sister Cynthia, when they did things the right way, things worked out. Okay? Now, and so but he gave this all to his people. Let's go to Amos, the 3rd chapter. He gave it. So how you gonna worship him? You must worship him according to what was written. We in Amos, the 3rd chapter. So he says in verse 1, he says, hear this word that the Lord has spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying, that we read when he brought, what he did. He manifested himself in Exodus 19th chapter to these people. He showed who he was even while they were still in Egypt. Even when he told them in Exodus the 20th chapter, I'm the Lord that God who just brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, right? He manifested himself unto them. And he says something, you only have I known of all the families of the earth. How is it that he's only known him? Listen, what he gave to Israel, he didn't give to another people directly like that. He said, therefore, I will punish you for all your iniquities. So when he showed himself and how you should worship him, and when we got away from it, he punished us. And here we sit, Deuteronomy 28th chapter, real quick. Here we sit in the land of captivity. Deuteronomy the 28th chapter and verse 15. He said, but it shall come to pass if thou wilt not hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. So we many of us are familiar with these curses. I just want to read in verse 63. It says, and it shall come to pass as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught. And ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. So they went into the promised land and ended up being cast out. Verse 68, the final dispersion. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. Egypt represents the house of bondage. It represents slavery. But he said you're going into slavery, not in Egypt landmass, but you're going into slavery by way of slave ships. He says, thou shalt see no more again, and there you shall be sold unto your enemies, so bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. And the punishment that we have faced as a people, brothers and sisters, is certainly, when you really look at it, it's been certainly devastating and terrible. Well, why did it come about? Because our worship was not proper. We didn't do things after the proper order as a people. Thus, we find ourselves in the situation that we are in right now. So what we need to do ultimately is turn back to him in righteousness. That's what we need to do. But you can see clearly, that's why we sitting here trying to get reparations. That's why we sitting after 100 years of Jim Crow, 246 years of slavery. That's why we're looking for some benevolent white people to do something for us. Please do something for us. And the problem is what you're doing. It's with the Most High. That's who we offended with our false worship, with our improper behavior. Well, that's it, brothers and sisters. And with that, I want to remind you that we're at the Household of Faith, meet every Sabbath at 5925 West 25th Avenue in Gary, Indiana at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. We live stream right here at the Israel Teach YouTube channel, as well as at www.israelteach.org. If you've been edified through the ministry and would like to leave a donation, 100% of the proceeds go to the work of the ministry. You can do that at our website at www.israelteach.org. All praise to the Most High, sister. Also, these books are available. I just want to make this Announcement: Enter Egypt again with ships. A message to the forgotten Israelites. Killing black innocents. Program to control African American reproduction. From slavery's end to the present day self-inflicted genocide. Hair like wool, feet like burned brass. The color of Jesus and burning truths concerning the Messiah. Pagan origins of Christian holidays. And the latest book for then should be Great Tribulation. And with that, brothers and sisters, it's always my prayer that you were edified.